Welcome back to the Legacy Radio Network. This is the Everything Financial Radio Show. Glad you're with us today. We have with us today Mr. Euan Wilson from the Socionomics Institute. And if you'd like to learn more about his work, you can go to socionomics.net. Euan, I want to pick up where we left off. Your boss, as we clarified in the last segment, Mr. Bob Prechter, is very bearish moving ahead. In fact, the last time I think he was on the program, he had predicted that by 2016 we could see the Dow bottom somewhere near 1,000, which is certainly a long drop. Assuming that that does occur, what would be your predictions for how social mood would be affected, and certainly what type of political movements or political changes might we expect?
Well, it's a fascinating question because in history, through history, the biggest drops in the stock market correspond to some of the biggest events in history. And I'm sure, like from 1929 to 1932, Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 89% of its value. In the United States, we had the Great Depression that followed. We had Prohibition repealed almost the next year. Actually, it was the next year, 1933. Touched off the Great Depression, allowed leaders, all like hostile, fascist leaders all over Europe to take power. It was the portent of a very dark time in our history, and it was all brought about in that major crash. So assuming that the crash that Bob is describing happens between now and 2016, and it certainly would take about that amount of time to shed that much value in the stock market as reflected by social mood. Obviously, it would be a very angry time in the United States. If social mood falls that far, you've got, first of all, from the fundamental side of it, you've got tremendous wealth destruction. But let's not forget that social mood is what drives the stock market, not the other way around. So people would already be feeling very negative and very angry in the meantime. Certainly, any groups that are currently in power would be reviled, if not already driven out. One of the side effects of negative social mood is people will become very frustrated with their leaders and drive them out of power. Richard Nixon's a great example in the tumultuous 70s. So certainly Barack Obama would probably leave office with historically negative presidential ratings if he hadn't been run out of office already. A third party might be able to make a good run of it in 2016 because it would be a good opportunity for them to do so. They would sort of be very easy. It would be very easy for a third party to make the argument that neither the Democrats nor the Republicans are a good option for running the country, as evidenced by the fact that the stock market is cratered down to 1,000. Aside from politics, or rather expanding the idea of politics, we would probably expect the drug war to be abandoned because there simply wouldn't be the social will to prosecute it anymore. That's one of the theses that I had in my drug study, is that when social mood gets very negative, people lose their will to prosecute drug wars because the energy required to prosecute a drug war is tremendous, and they just don't have it anymore. Nor do they have, on the fundamental side of things, they don't have the money to do it either. So that's a possibility as well. Culturally, I would expect sports to become more violent. The music would probably get a lot more complicated and introspective. We wouldn't be seeing, Justin Bieber or Katy Perry, these pop acts that are currently dominant today. In a negative society, those go away, and music becomes more complicated and dark and bleak. Same deal with television. Television would definitely get darker, more so than it is now. I actually did a study this year about the nature of television as it is at the moment. Why is our shows like Mad Men and Breaking Bad and Homeland all cleaning up at the Emmy Awards as opposed to more mainstream fare? It's because we think the mood is waxing a bit negative. So if the stock market were to crater down to 1,000, we'd see even darker, more bleak shows than that taking over the airwaves. That's culturally it's very interesting, but politically it's a risky thing to propose.
Euan, I want to go back and maybe pick up on something that you said. You stated that social mood really controls the stock market, not vice versa. And a question popped to my mind: can socionomics or the science of socionomics be used to predict market movement?
Well, we certainly think that social mood is patterned. That stems from research into the Elliott wave principle, which, as you know, Bob Prechter is the expert on. I study socionomics, which is the study of well, it's what we've been talking about all day. But it's built around the idea of the Elliott wave principle, which seems to suggest, well, it does suggest that the stock market is patterned and therefore to some degree predictable. The waves of social mood affect the waves that technical analysts who practice the Elliott wave principle see in the stock market. And so in that sense, yes, a practiced individual can use it to make calls in the stock market. Now, if you're not a stock market analyst, if you're not into technical analysis, but you feel like society is either at a top or a bottom based on what's happening culturally, you can make the same kind of calls. For instance, in 1999, it was an extremely positive time, and you could possibly make the call that the stock market was beginning to top out in that time based on what was happening culturally. It's a profoundly peaceful time in the world, lots of extremely positive pop culture events were happening at that time, like Friends was dominating the television shows. Poppy boy bands like NSYNC and Backstreet Boys were ruling the music charts. It was an extremely positive time. So even if you're not a stock market analyst, you can use cultural events, judge the tone and how they're being received, and then make a call on where social mood is accordingly. So if you are calling an extreme top based on what's happening culturally, you might want to get out of the market or sell short. Same deal at bottoms. If things can't get any worse, you might want to buy. It's the old saying, buy when there's blood in the streets. Well, that's certainly applicable to what we say, because if society is to the point where people are killing each other, it certainly can't get any worse mood-wise. That's the ultimate expression of anger, is killing your neighbors. So if you see that moment, it may not seem like a good idea to buy at the time, but certainly things are probably not going to get any cheaper.
You had mentioned something, Euan, in this segment as well, that music changes and sports, and I'm a sports fan, so it kind of caught my ears. Sports become more violent. Is that good news if you're an NFL franchise owner?
That's a bit of an uncomfortable question for me, because I never want to see athletes who are pursuing the sport that they love get injured, get hurt. One could make the argument that the reason that the NFL controversy over concussions is coming to light is because we're currently sort of trending upwards with positive social mood. The stock market has been up for the past 3.5 years. And that's being reflected, one can make the argument, by increased concern for the safety of football players. Now, if you're the type of football fan that is interested in seeing it as being as gritty as possible, this isn't welcome news for you, and so a decline in the stock market might be something that you'd be interested in. Now, I personally am not a fan of that proposition, because I don't like seeing bright, talented young men smashing themselves to pieces for the sake of entertainment. Now, it may be something that they love, but that's my personal opinion. I shouldn't let that get in the way of a forecast. But if you're interested as a football owner, an NFL football owner, in keeping the sport the way it is, and tradition in the matter of tradition and all that, then a decline in the stock market might not be such a bad thing for you. A decline in social mood might not be such a bad thing for you.
Euan, there seems to be, certainly from my perspective, an ever-increasing amount of government regulation. Certainly during the political season, we had political candidates on the program who talked about the fact that it was their belief that one of the reasons the economy wasn't growing at a faster pace was increasing regulation. We are now facing the fiscal cliff here in the United States, and there's talk about raising taxes on high earners. To what extent, in your view and from your research, is this whole idea of increasing regulation and increasing taxes, bigger government, tied to social mood?
Well, I would say that, first of all, I'd like to point out that a lot of the rally from 2009 until now is largely phony. It's been sort of propped up by the Federal Reserve with forcing rates low and printing money. So, in that sense, if you adjust the stock market for inflation, it hasn't increased as much as it appears, just nominally. So in that sense, social mood isn't as high, which means that if social mood isn't as high as the stock market, it suggests that the people, that society at large, is feeling more negative. And one of the things that we say that negative feeling societies look to do is find anybody to blame. Sometimes that means that they'll go to war with somebody. Sometimes it means a civil war with their neighbors. Other times it just means that everybody just starts to bicker. We've certainly seen a lot of bickering in the United States politically with people, with Congress refusing to compromise with President Obama about what to do about this fiscal cliff situation, and the insistence of one side that we're either cutting programs or nothing, and the other side insisting that we're either raising taxes on the rich or nothing. And their whole refusal to compromise, their refusal to meet each other in the middle, this very fractious society we have going, it's a sign of negative social mood. People can't cooperate because they don't feel like they're cooperating, and they feel like everybody else is wrong and that they're always correct. This is a sign of a fractious society that is made all the more stubborn by increasing negative social mood, which is one of the reasons that Bob Prechter, I think, is calling for a low in 2016, or rather a decline up through 2016. It's already begun based on how fractured our government is.
So if you were to make a prediction, Euan, as to how this whole fiscal cliff thing plays out based on your study of socionomics, what would your perspective be?
Well, they're certainly going to. Politicians are rather self-serving, so they'll figure out something. They'll figure out something right at the last minute. But neither side is going to want to give in because of how stubborn this negative social mood is making them feel at the moment. They are reluctant to come to compromise based on that, and so the fiscal cliff will continue to be a fiasco right up until the last minute. And it's my expectation that they'll just kick the can down the road because at the moment, the current negotiations that we have in place are a lame duck Congress anyway, and so they'll probably just let the next guys come in, clean up the mess, as is usually the case with government.
You know, you have something interesting on your website, and we've got maybe 2.5 minutes left or so. A socionomic study of epidemic diseases. Fascinating to me. Can you expand on that a little bit?
It's a great study done by my colleague, Alan Hall. He does extremely well-researched, in-depth articles. I encourage you to check him out, and your listeners to check him out as well. He's very, very good. Basically, the assertion in his study is that a profoundly negative feeling society, that is a society with depressed social mood, is more susceptible to disease. Now, why is that? Well, one of the things that doctors are very clear on is that a stressed person is their immune system is more likely to be compromised. Sad, depressed people, sad, stressed, angry people are more susceptible to disease, and we think that this applies to society at large as well. Throughout history, we've got a lot of major epidemics exploding at various times, and when we look at those times, we also see that they're usually surrounded by some major wars as well. So there are these angry, depressed societies that are fighting each other that also get disease. And prosperous societies are much less likely to have this happen to them. For instance, there wasn't really a major plague during the latter stages of the Renaissance, and we consider that time a very positive social mood due to all of the fundamental development that was happening. So this idea that social mood may contribute to the health of the society is something that we've backed up through research, and Alan Hall, I think, did a spectacular job with that.
Euan Wilson, thank you so much for joining us today. Hope you'll come back sometime.
Absolutely, Dan. Thank you for having us.
This is the Legacy Radio Network, and Everything Financial Radio will return after these words. Stay with us.